What's up, guys? Owen here. I think I found something pretty incredible for you guys today, and it's basically my defining principles, how I've been able to be successful in pretty much anything that I've tried to do. And I mapped it out. I went back through my roots on what books I read, what information I took in, who I listened to, things that founded my core belief system, my core perception of the world, and I figured out how I did it. And I'm gonna walk you through exactly how I did it. I graphed it out, I wrote it all out for you, and it's basically called the 3 R's. And the first R is resistance, the second is reading, and the third is resilience. And so I'm going to explain those R's for you, and let's get into it. So the first R we have, we'll actually start with reading, because reading is basically the information that you need in order to be successful. And so reading has always been a big part of my life. I actually struggled to read when I was like 3 or 4 years old, but after that I got into novels pretty quickly, read all the main novels and stuff that everyone was reading, like Harry Potter, Rick Riordan books, the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, Mike Lupica books around sports and stuff like that. But honestly, reading now has obviously changed for me. It used to be just about those things, but now it's a lot different. So things that I talk about now when I'm talking about reading are books like, are books from people like Jocko Willink. He's a Navy SEAL, and he has books on leadership. And so that's extremely important. The reason why we talk about reading is because whatever your inputs are going to be your outputs. So you should not read or consume information from people that are not where you want to be in life, because you're just getting bad inputs from them. And all the time, people source information from people and they ask their friends or whatever. It's like your friends are not where you want to be in life, probably. So you shouldn't really ask your friends. You should ask your mentors maybe, or you should ask people, people that have been more successful than you. But the most successful people put that information online. So you can actually find it now much easier than ever before. So there's no excuse for you not to have the right information to act on. So the first step, the first R, is reading. That's sourcing information. So Jocko, Tim Grover, I'm just gonna list a bunch of authors that have made a huge impact in my life, and then I want you to go and find these books yourself. So Tim Grover, he was the trainer for Kobe and Jordan. And that's really important because you need to emulate, again, the most successful, hardest working people. How did they get there? And their trainer actually has a huge impact on that. Plus, he's got to work with them for 20 plus years. So he has a lot of insight there. The next one is The Almanac from Naval Ravikant. This is a massively important book. It was written by Eric Jorgensen. I don't actually know him, but it's all about Naval's teachings and things that he's said throughout his life. Again, extremely important for the ideal version of myself. And then as a creative, probably the most important books that I've read, like a book like this, which is from Steven Pressfield. So Steven Pressfield, again, amazing author. And Steven's written books like Do the Work, The War of Art, which is probably my favorite book ever, because as a creative, you have this inherent resistance to what you're doing. And I'm actually going to talk about that next. That's the next R. This inherent resistance that stops you from doing what you want to do. Like literally, you have a goal and you want to do it, but it doesn't get done because of the resistance. And I'll explain it. It's super interesting. But Steven Pressfield, Do the Work, and The War of Art first, if you can. Those are incredible books to read. And then honestly, self-help books I think are super important. People like Jordan Peterson writing books like 12 Rules for Life, I think are very important to know as well. And then honestly, beyond reading, we'll go podcasts. Just a couple of podcasts I think are extremely important for going a little bit deeper on subjects that you're interested in, or maybe just getting an introduction to subjects. So in terms of actualization and getting the right information, you should read biographies. So you can also put biographies up here. I actually like listening to biographies more than reading them because I don't understand the full context when I'm just reading. You're just reading a biography. Sometimes you don't get the full context. But when you're listening to one, people will actually give you the full context of what was going on in that time period, what was going on in that era, what was standard. And the best person to do that is, in my mind, the Founders Podcast. And the Founders Podcast is literally incredible. Like so good. It's basically a bunch of biographies from history's greatest founders, and it's probably been the best source of information for me trying to learn from people like Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, Elon, Mr. Beast even is on there, but different people too, like Sam Zamuri or Enzo Ferrari, or basically any great entrepreneur in history is on there. Coco Chanel. You can go listen to their podcasts. I listened to so many. Honestly, Rockefeller, the 38 Letters to His Son is probably my favorite podcast episode ever. I would start there because Rockefeller wrote 38 letters to his son, handwritten notes for birthdays or milestones and stuff like that, and send them directly to his son about life and lessons from the most dominant entrepreneur maybe ever, who owned the oil industry when he was 25 years old in the United States. That's crazy. And Rockefeller wrote them thinking they were private for his son forever, but they were published after he died, which is, so like you get that information for free, and they're principles that they go off of. It's really incredible. Highly recommend checking it out. The next one I think is really good would be Modern Wisdom. I think Modern Wisdom is a great podcast. Modern Wisdom is ran by Chris Williamson. It's a lot more modern, hence the name, but has a lot of good insights there. Things like evolutionary biology and theory and how that affects our lives currently. Super interesting stuff. It's a little bit not as deep normally, but I've picked up some great podcasts on there, like The Science of Serendipity, and honestly a lot more. I mean, anytime I want more of a male-based understanding of where we are in society about pretty much anything, that's where I'll go. So you have like history and entrepreneurship and context and stuff like that, and then you'll have Modern Wisdom. I've also put in some time into My First Million. It's a podcast by Sean Purry and the white guy, I forget his name, Sam or something, I forget. But anyways, it's a HubSpot sponsored podcast, and actually they interview the CEO or founder of HubSpot. I forget his name, but Dharmesh, I think. Very, very smart guy. Really cool listening to that as well. So My First Million is a great podcast. And again, these are all under reading. So let's take reading as a whole. You need to be reading and consuming really good information, but that is not enough. And so the second part comes in, which is doing. And the reason why successful people only make up a small part of the general population is because there's doers and there's dreamers or people that are not doing. But the reason why the dreamers are in one corner and the doers are in the other corner is because the doers have figured out how to overcome this internal resistance that we face. And you may not even be aware of what this is, but I'm gonna break it down for you. So resistance, I found out about in this book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. So resistance is described by Pressfield as like a universal force to keep things how they are when you're trying to create, okay? So right now, you're like, oh, like maybe I should post on social media or maybe I should write this book or whatever, but you never do it, and it's because of resistance. And the reason why resistance exists, again, this is why it's important to understand and read things like Modern Wisdom and understand evolutionary theory, is because we actually grew up, or our biology is from groups and small groups of people that we needed to survive. So going against people and like the norm and the status quo and trying to do something different is frowned upon by your own biology. It comes with resistance. You don't naturally want to do it because you're going to separate from the crowd, from the herd, and be honestly exposed to more danger. Back in the day, if you did that, you'd go out on your own, you'd be fucking killed. You would be hunted down by lions or something, right? You need the group to survive. But now we don't have that outcome anymore. We're protected. So you can actually challenge the resistance and create and be an individual and put yourself out there, and you're going to be totally fine. Okay, that's the reality of the situation. You're going to be totally fine. Things are okay. You can go be more creative, and actually you'll get rewarded when you are more creative. So if you have all the right information, which most of you probably do. If you're watching this video, you honestly probably have all the right information, then the thing stopping you from being successful or who you want to be is really this concept of resistance, which is a universal force stopping you from creating. And the most important way to overcome that is to understand that resistance takes many, many different forms. It's not just like, oh, I'm lazy or I'm tired. It's I'm inspired, but I'm gonna go listen to this podcast so I have a little bit better understanding of this concept. Or it's, this video is really, really good, but I don't quite want to put it out yet because it's not perfect. So it can be procrastination, perfectionism, self-doubt, fear of failure is a big one, distractions, over-preparing, addiction, listening to critics. And so procrastination, perfectionism, self-doubt, fear of failure, distractions, over-preparing, addictions, listening to critics, mental masturbation, going and listening to podcasts and stuff. It's like if you're not producing and you're trying to do something creative, you're gonna have resistance in one of these forms, or if not all of them. But the only thing that actually matters is literally hitting post. And you'll talk about, well, I don't wanna, you'll have all these excuses in your brain for why you're not posting. It's the resistance. And honestly, you just have to post. And if you don't post, you lose the game. That is the game. Maybe it's not posting. Maybe for you, it's writing that book, writing that article, writing your Substack, whatever it may be. That's a creative endeavor. You're not going to win if you do not do what you're trying to do. And these are the forces that you have to recognize that are stopping you from doing that. And a lot of people think they're doing the right thing by learning or listening or whatever. At a certain point, you know everything there is to know and you just have to fucking do it. And you're gonna be like, well, I wanna wait till I have my PhD and I'm an expert in this, or I wanna wait till I lose 30 pounds, then I can talk about it. It's like, shut the fuck up and post the video, pussy. Otherwise, you're not gonna be who you wanna be. It's actually that simple. Again, this concept comes from Stephen Pressfield, right? And Stephen Pressfield wrote The War of Art. He wrote Do the Work. He wrote a ton of different books that are extremely important for you to read because he's a creative and he understands going through all this stuff. If you're not posting and you want to do something successful that requires art, then you need to understand this concept. So once you've read up and you're educated on what you want to speak on or what you want to do, then the next thing is resistance and getting over that fear and that resistance, honestly, to creating. That's the second hardest part. And then the third hardest part is resilience, because most people, if they somehow get over the first step, they're smart enough to get past the first step. The second step, which means they're dumb enough to get out there and put their stuff out there, even though it's not perfect, or, they're not procrastinating anymore, they're getting their stuff out there. Getting past the second step is really, really hard. But once you do that, the third step, that in order for you to be successful as a creative person, or honestly any person, that entrepreneur trying to do their own thing, you're gonna have to be resilient. And so, I'll tell you a story where my grandparents are from Finland. They believe in this concept called sisu, which is a unique Finnish quality that basically means being extremely gritty and persevering, but it doesn't actually have like an English translation. So it's like kind of being gritty, persevering through insurmountable odds, basically. No matter what, you survive, you push through. And the Finnish people are extremely tough and gritty in that way. And my grandparents told me that about me. They're like, we can see sisu. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. When I was like 5, right? I had no idea what they're talking about. But I embodied it because I looked it up when I was older and I was like, oh, it means like extremely tough and gritty and willing to do what it takes, basically. And so that's what I was like, okay, like that's part of my core identity now. So I identify myself with that idea of tough grit and perseverance no matter what. And honestly, that's probably what's helped me most in life, is having that self-perception of being extremely resilient from sisu. Because realistically, if you talk to anyone that's successful, they've probably been doing it for a long time. That's really the reality. It takes years to be successful. But most people will be like bouncing around trying to get to whatever flashy thing that they want. It's like it takes just 4 or 5 years of doing whatever to be successful at it. And honestly, because of social media, access to capital, all these opportunities we have now, there's never been a time to be more successful and more resilient. Because if you're able to stick something through, that's the differentiating factor, is how long can you stick it through? How long can you do what you're doing and not see results? How long can you do what you're doing and have people make fun of you? And most people honestly just can't do it. And people keep talking about saturation. It's not a real thing because everyone gives up and quits, and no one does it at the amount of volume required, which means it's not really saturated. It's just not. I mean, if you think of the best fitness creators in the world or the best podcasters in the world, there's like less than 100 of them every time. Every time there's like less than 100 of them in every realm of human endeavor. And so that's where I want to be, is a top 100 in one of those realms. I've done it before in gaming, when I was finishing in the World Cup, top 50-ish. Like that was pretty fucking cool. But I honestly wasn't that good to crack like top 5, top 10, which is even more important for a niche like gaming, which is really important to know where your skill set lies. But you have to be resilient, because I honestly maybe could have done it in gaming if I had stuck it out. But I also am smart enough to know that that's maybe not what I wanted to do forever. So I kind of figured out something better, which is social media, because I love social media. I've always loved it. In fact, when I was gaming, I was still posting on social media heavily for gaming, right? So social media overarched all this other stuff. Basketball, gaming, TikTok, whatever it may be. Now I've been doing social media professionally or as a career for the past few years, which means in a year or two, when I hit 4 or 5 years of doing this stuff, I'm gonna be in a really fucking good spot. So I'm still on my way up. People, don't understand that concept, but I have a longer time horizon, which allows me to be more successful. So you have to be resilient. And so once you're posting, this idea of resistance is never gonna go away, which means you have to be resilient with what you want and never give in to resistance or giving up, listening to other people's opinions or what they say about you. It's all noise. None of it matters. It's not real. You have to be super resilient. And once you do all 3 of these things, these 3 R's right here, then you can go do basically whatever you want in life and be extremely successful. So I hope that helps, guys. Do the 3 R's, be extremely successful, and go get it.